Hey everybody, welcome along to episode 125 of Percussion Discussion Podcast. Please check out our social media. You'll find us on Facebook and Instagram. And of course, our world famous YouTube channel, where you can find all of the conversations, past and present, with the video to accompany it. Please subscribe if you don't mind. We don't have any adverts on there. It's just it helps other drummers find us with more subscribers. So if you could do that, that would be marvelous. If you'd rather listen on the go, then you can download it as a podcast from all of your favorite podcast providers, and you can listen wherever you like. On to today's guest. We have a fine British drummer with an incredible CV. He's played for the likes of Bryan Ferry, KT Tunstall, who else? Rumour, and more recently, Reef. He also has his own studio where he does countless recordings for other people as well. It gives me great pleasure to welcome the fabulous Mr. Luke Bullen.
Absolute pleasure. Good to see you.
Likewise, mate. Likewise. So, how's things at the moment? What are you up to?
It's I've had a busy few months actually. I've been out with Rumour. She's going out doing a few shows at the moment, also putting together a new record. So the last gig I did with her was a couple of weeks ago up in Nantwich at the Civic Hall. It was a music festival there, which was awesome actually. One of my favorite gigs ever.
Wow.
Just really came together. Great back. There was slightly different lineup. I don't know, there was something magical going on that evening. So we had a great night. So we did a few gigs with her over the summer. Reef wound up about a month or so ago. We had a really busy year, and that's been really good fun. So we're just taking a bit of a break and sort of thinking, putting plans together for a new record. Festival shows are coming in for next year. What else have I been up to? Quite a few bits and pieces going on in the studio. Some young artists that I'm working with, particularly a guy called Ross Stewart. He lives locally. He's from Scotland, but he lives in Norfolk. So we've been putting together some music, some of his original music together, and we made a video over the summer and did that. So yeah, fingers in lots of pies and just keeping busy, really.
That's cool. So you don't rest on your laurels then. You just get on and do whatever.
No, I think from day one in this business, you just you hope work comes your way, but if it doesn't, you got to make work. So when I'm not gigging or anything like that, I'm in here practicing, I'm studying at the moment. And just you just got to keep driving forward, and that's one of the joys I think of it as well. There's always something to learn, always someone new to check out, always something to dig out off the internet, which is a great tool. And get your head back in the books.
The only thing is, we're going on the internet. It's a rabbit warren, isn't it? Once you get into the thing, it's like you next thing you look and there's 5 hours gone and you haven't actually done anything. You've just looked at
things. At the moment, I'm being very specific. I'm not known as a jazz drummer, and it's something I love and something I haven't been able to dedicate a lot of time to. So at the moment, I'm very focused on all the classic jazz drummers, all the educationalists that kind of specialize in that area, like John Riley and things like that. And I'm sort of digging into those things. And but like you say, you kind of, if you branch off from that, you can just disappear forever. And there's a wealth of material to discover.
Yeah, and unfortunately, well, I certainly haven't got the time for that, and I'm sure you haven't either. It just goes,
Yeah,
and it's a good thing because it's stuff you're into. But yeah, day when your phone tells you how long you've been on social media for, the end of the week, you kind of go, oh god,
and you're like, oh god.
What can I have done with those 17 hours that week? Exactly. On my accounts. So tell me about the Rumour gig, because for me, she has one of the most remarkable voices, Karen Carpenter-esque, and I know that's been said a lot over the years. That must be such a contrast to what Reef do, because I'm sure it's more about colors and sounds, and rather than going for it.
Absolutely. Well, this gig that really stood out there a couple of weeks back, we were rehearsing the day before, and I was just playing. I think we were playing what's the song? That's That. No, it wasn't. It was not. Anyway, whatever the song. But I was just sitting between a really simple ride, kick drum, snare drum groove, really simple. But everyone in the room was just all happy, you know, the magic was happening. And I was like, I couldn't be happier. You know, like this, it was just that it was the magic was in the simplicity and the fact that 5 people, 6 people in a room were creating this beautiful noise. And no one was playing anything particularly complicated, but it just came together. And I think that's the beauty of that gig. And I was talking to Matt, who was playing bass on the gig, and saying, like, with Reef, it's about energy. It's about creating the right vibe. Obviously, you got to get the parts right, but there's a lot more leeway. You know, you can get away with a lot more things as long as the energy, you know, you're matching the energy of the other 3 people on stage. You can get away with a lot more. It's not about precision. And with Ruma, every note feels exposed because there's not a lot going on. It's quite sparse and it's very quiet. So you've really got to work with the dynamics. But flitting between those 2 disciplines I love, you know, because both of them present a different challenge, you know, and a different way of drumming. And I think that's one thing I've always enjoyed in my career, is doing lots of different things, because every environment you find yourselves in presents yourself with a different challenge, and the Ruma gig's great for that. It's all about the right notes in the right place, and which is the obvious thing to say, but it because of the exposure of those notes, it's that much more important. You know, you don't get away with.
Totally get that. And you know, when you can be happy playing the simplest of grooves, that's the ultimate for me. I can't do the flash stuff anyway, so there's no chance of that ever happening. But I'm satisfied just sitting there with a brush and a stick, and it's just like, this works, doesn't it? I play the same thing for 3 hours. I'm happy with it. I'm okay with it.
Yeah, well, yeah, and especially when everyone else around you is on the same page. No one's there to, you know, to prove themselves, or you know, it's not an ego thing. It's like, okay, this is the song, these are the parts, let's dig into this and play it as well as we can. And when that happens, it doesn't have to be complicated. You know.
And you mentioned about that gig in particular in Nantwich, and I know the venue. It's a beautiful venue. You said there were some different band members in. Do you like that I guess it creates a slightly different feel? Everyone plays things differently, even if you play in the same parts, same notes, you can play them differently.
Yeah, I don't think it was the fact that the band had changed. It was that it was noticeable because they had, but I don't think that meant that it was a special gig. I think it was just a special gig because everything, you know, some nights it's okay, and some nights some magic happens, and it was just one of those nights that the magic happened. But I would say I also really enjoy when you're touring and it is the same lineup, that you can really dig deep.
Sure.
But you know, the every night you're playing a similar set. I'm thinking back to the Bryan Ferry band, and that would be, you know, for a year it would be the same lineup, and the set would be similar. You know, be a few changes every now and again, but you kind of built on the night before. And there's a real, I get a lot of there's a lot of value to that for me personally, that, you know, you take each night and it can be very similar, but you're tweaking things every day. And we did a lot of that with Bryan. You know, with a sound check would be 3 hours, and we'd be rehearsing stuff every day. You know, it'd be like, yeah, but there was, again, that inspired everyone to dig deep. And I think when you're on tour, rather than, you know, not that I've ever gone through the motions, but it stopped that happening.
Sure.
You know, it stopped us just dialing it in, that every night was important because we tweaked something in the sound check. So you were constantly engaged with the show, with the songs, and you know, you couldn't dial it in because you were constantly aware of what the tune should be.
I'm just trying to envisage a sound check that's longer than the gig. I don't think I've ever come across that before.
It would quite often be that, you know, longer, that we'd spend more time on stage and sound check than we would on the show. Yeah,
it's amazing. Yeah. I mean, hats off to the guy for being that and wanting to keep it freshened up, you know. And
absolutely. I mean, some days that was frustrating because you're like, oh, really? You know, we're going over the same thing ever again. But the proof was in the pudding. We put on a fantastic show, and that was another thing that came up, that the fact that even after 50 year career, he cared that much.
Yeah,
you know, it wasn't, just do that tonight. It was like, no, we're going to do this, and that wasn't quite right tonight, so we're going to look at that little part and we're going to get it right, you know. And you know, it was a real education being in that band.
Incredible. I mean, you think of the drummers that have gone before you in that band. Was it daunting at all knowing who's? I mean, Andy
Yeah,
comes to mind straight away, who has the touch of God. Uh,
absolutely. Well, one of the things that I loved about the gig was when between tours, I would get songs to kind of check out,
Mhm.
and because they had the original multi tracks, what they would do, they would pan the music, the band one side, and whoever was drumming on the record on the other. So I could isolate Andy, I could isolate, Jerry Marotta, I could isolate, all the guys that have passed through his musical career, and I'd get these exposed drum tracks, and it'd just be jaw dropping. And I learned so much.
I'll
You
bet.
know, I remember I remember a particular part that Andy did, and that's like, within the recording itself, it was like, what the hell's he doing there? And then I would get the individual stems of just the drums. That's like, oh right, okay, that's it. And I maybe like look up a live version online and go, okay, so that the right hand's staying on the snare drum, so he must be doing that, and it would be like a bit of detective work. They're going, I can hear what he's doing, I can't work out quite what he's doing, but I learned so much. It
That's
was
like a
brilliant.
real privileged position to be in, to
Yeah,
hear those kind of things.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
just,
yeah,
oh, because
yeah.
sometimes when it's mixed, and you can't always really pick out what's going on, can you? So to have them panned so they're all on one side, wow,
Yeah.
that's just
And
incredible.
also to work with an artist that was that cared that much about the detail. I remember I'd been doing the gig for about 4 years, and I got an email between tours with Avalon, one
Yeah,
of the big hits that
of
we'd been
course.
playing. That was a staple of the set, so I'd been playing that for 4 years, and I got an email from the studio. And it said, "Can you just check out the second verse? There's a bass drum that you're playing that isn't in that part. Could you have a look at the bass drum part in the second verse of that song again for the next tour to get it right?" And it's like,
I mean,
wow,
he picked it up on stage and gone,
yeah,
that is incredible.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Because they'd record every show, and he'd obviously, when between tours, he'd go into his studio and listen to the live show, and he would pick out those kind of details for everyone. It's like it was,
that's
yeah,
incredible.
fascinating.
The only other
Mm.
person I've heard that is similar to that is Roger Waters. Um,
Right, okay,
Apparently,
yeah,
he notices the slightest little
yeah.
detail, and yeah, it's a similar kind of thing, similar era, I guess, really, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, they were from an era where they'd spend 3 years making an album.
Yeah, yeah.
You know what I mean? So they got to get into that detail, and then they would hiring different session musicians if it wasn't quite feeling right. There was that much money in the industry that they had the luxury of time and endless budgets that they could just put into that much detail in a record.
Can you imagine spending 3 years on an album these days?
No, it doesn't happen, does it?
3 weeks is extravagant these days, isn't it? To be honest. So, but tell me, how does it feel when, a great gig like that, things come to an end, bands get freshened up, bands get changed, and it's never normally a personal thing. It's just one of those things, but things just get freshened up. How does it feel when a great gig like that comes to an end? Do you just move on, or is there a bit of,
Oh,
oh,
there's definitely a sadness because there was such camera. Like I'd done the gig for 2 years and I was let go at the end of the second year. I got the call to say, Brian's having a new, putting together a new band, and he was getting Paul Thompson, the original Roxy Music drummer, back in. And I was like, yeah, it makes total sense. I as a fan, I'd love to see those two on stage again. So there was a sadness, but an appreciation of what was going on. And then a couple of months passed, and it turned out Paul's health wasn't so great, so they invited me back in, and then I did another 4 years. And then the last gig I did with Brian was at the Albert Hall, and we did 2 nights there, and it was about 10 days before we went into lockdown. The second of those nights was hanging in the balance because everyone, no one knew at that point what we were heading into. So that came to an end, and when we came out of lockdown, he put together Roxy Music again, and obviously Paul came back in, and then the last I heard is there's no plans for Brian to go back out on the road. So it was the end of that gig was different in that it naturally came to an end. COVID brought brought things to a close. And then when he did go back out again, it was Roxy Music, which I wasn't part of, so totally understood Paul going back into that. But definitely, I mean, I feel it now. There's a sadness, because it's 6 years, and there was a few changes in that time, but there was a core group of musicians, and I feel that with all the gigs that I've done for any length of time, you create a bond that's really special. Yeah. There's people in Katie Tunstall's band that I toured with for 10 years, 8, 9, 10 years, and we will always have that bond, even if we don't speak to each other for a while. It's like we've been through so much together, and it's the same with Brian Camp. I caught up with a couple of people when I was on tour this year with Reef. I caught up a couple of people who live in different parts of the country, and you've just got that, we spent that time together, and it was special, and there was challenges, and there was difficult moments, and there was highs, and and in going through those sort of kind of that roller coaster of a touring experience, you create those bonds, and they're really special. So to move away from it is sad, but I went straight into the Reef gig, and they're absolutely lovely, and the Rumour gigs come up this year, and that's brilliant. That's something different again. So I just feel super grateful that I'm still working.
Yeah. And I guess the thing is, you've delivered on every gig, every studio session, and you haven't burnt any bridges, have you? So should the opportunity arise again, I'm sure they'll be more than happy to take you back on board, which is always a nice thing, isn't it? Let's be honest.
Yeah. And 6, Brian gig specifically, 6 years is a lot. Was a long time. I think there was only me and the saxophonist that had been in the band that long. Everyone else kind of, he'd shift it around to, like you say, to freshen things up. So I was, really grateful to hang in there for that amount of time.
And to be honest, 2 nights at the Albert Hall is not a bad way to bow out, is it?
No, exactly. We definitely ended on a high. Yeah, that was. Yeah, they were both great gigs. Yeah, and they released an album from it as well. It was live at the Albert Hall. So, and he hadn't done that since the 70s. So I'm on that. So yeah, there's it's all pluses. It's all pluses.
Would you say that's a career highlight then for you, especially being part of Brian's band there?
Yeah, I mean, it took me to places that there was so that I'm just having flashbacks. So many great memories of some really standout shows.
Yeah.
We did the Hollywood Bowl with an orchestra, which was just phenomenal. And that was, that always stands out to me because we started touring in February, and the gig at the Hollywood Bowls was at the end of August. And the whole year was kind of geared up for that gig. So as we were touring, the set would change, we'd try different songs, and they would send recordings back to London for the string arranger to kind of orchestrate the parts. So there was this constant progress and process over the year just to get to this last date, and it was the last date of the run. So by the time we got to LA, we had, on the day we arrived in LA, we went to the Walt Disney Theatre, and the orchestra were there for the first time with the parts, having a run through, and we just got to watch. And then the only run through we had with them was on the day of the show. Wow. We had one run through in the afternoon, and then we just stepped on stage and had to do it. And it was a 10-piece band with Brian anyway, so there was always a sense of me in the center and everyone around me. But then I also had like 60 odd people behind me, with the conductor standing right behind me with the screens either side, so I could see him and he could watch me, and walked on stage in front of like 10,000 people, and then in my head I was like, don't mess this up. This is, and after a couple of songs, like my heart was just going to leap from my chest, that sense of occasion and the sense of the pressure on the show because of the build up.
Of course.
And about 4 songs in, I was like, this is going all right. And I could enjoy it. And with the orchestra, it was like riding a steam train. It was amazing. And we got to the end of the gig, and it was just this sense of, jubilation because we'd done it, and it was a great show. And, like all the endings, obviously the conductor was watching me and cueing the orchestra. So that sense of occasion and power, and it's just overwhelming. And then sort of kind of finished, stood up, took a bow, and then the conductor leaned over the podium and just fist bumped me, and it was like, oh yeah,
that's the ultimate.
Yeah.
So that show, it was only one show with the orchestra, and that was it. Wow.
With that orchestra, and because it went so well, we then did 2 other shows in Europe.
Yeah.
Which because we'd done it, I could take those in a little bit more.
Yeah.
I could, you know, when we did the Hollywood Bowl show, it was just over. It was like, you know, just intense and, you know, sensory overload. With the European stuff, it's like, okay, I've done this once before. I know what's going on, and I, you know, and I really sort of took on board what they were playing rather than just feeling what they were playing.
Of course.
So those 2 shows are great as well. Really good.
So not only a 60, 70 piece orchestra, but the Hollywood Bowl to contend with as well, you know. The good thing is, I'm guessing your band, the band, would have been as tight as they could have possibly been at that point. So, you know, well-oiled machine. And the way I always look at these gigs with orchestras is the band, you can do it without the orchestra can't do it without the band. So I always think that must take the pressure off a tiny little bit. You know what you're doing. And there's one thing that's always fascinated me, and that is when you're working with a conductor, and there's no click involved, which I'm guessing there wouldn't have been on that.
I'm just trying to think. Yeah, there were clicks, but
okay.
Yeah, because I with that I always played with click again because Bryan was so particular. You know, we would do, you know, like between shows, it would go, can you put that up 1 BPM? Can we try that 1 BPM down? There was constant kind of, you know, like working on making sure the tempos are right. So I would often play to a click, and there were definitely songs with a bit of track as well.
Sure. So for the sake of the orchestra then, and the musical director, conductor, would he have had click as well, or was he going purely from your countings?
Purely from my countings. Yeah.
There's the pressure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
you don't want to get that wrong.
No.
Wow, that must be some memory to keep.
Yeah, it was really good. But you know, there's I think there was, with that band, you know, not only was it, you know, there was gigs like that and the Albert Hall, and you know, around Australia, going to Russia for the first time, all these things, you know, we're going on these great venues that we got to play because of who Bryan was. But there was also the musicians that I got to play with. You know, there's Chris Spedding on guitar, who could just make my jaw drop nightly. You know, even in the same song, he'd have you know, he would get the solo spot in this song every night. And I remember I'd be like, wow, you know, like, where did that come from? That's incredible. And we had Fonzie Thornton, who did backing vocals a lot for Bryan, and he was involved in Bryan's solo stuff in the 70s. So he's worked on and off with Bryan, but he also organized Aretha Franklin's backing vocals. So he was her, you know, head of her section. So there was one morning, I mean, we were doing a UK tour, and it's one of the few occasions we were on a tour bus, and I was up early with Fonzie, you know, having a cup of tea in the morning, and his mobile phone goes, and he picks up the phone, goes, and he's like, "Oh, hi, Aretha. I'm just sitting there. I'm just sitting opposite, going, you're talking to Aretha Franklin. You've just blown my mind, you know." There's a guy called Neil Jason who played bass a few times. And he's, you know, the guys he normally plays with are Terry Bozzio in the Brecker band, Gad, Steve Jordan. You know, he's like this session supremo in America, and it was just mind-boggling. And that makes me think, they weren't in the bands, but on the very first tour I did with Bryan, we had she's Welsh, but she lives in America, an artist called Judith Owen, who was supporting us, and her band were Lee Sklar and Russ Kunkel over the rhythm. I know, and that was like, you're supporting us, you know. I've got all the records you're on, you know. And so I got to have dinner with Russ Kunkel one night, and I remember because it was a high pressure gig. I remember Lee Sklar came into catering one day, and it was just me and Bryan and a couple of other people, and I think it had been a bit of a tense rehearsal, and Lee just pointed at me, went, "Your groove is absolutely fantastic," and it was like, it's come from Lee Sklar. That's amazing. And also Bryan's in the room to hear it. That's like double whammy.
I can retire now.
Yeah, I'm done. My work here is done. I'm off.
Lee Sklar seal of approval. That says, you know, to hear that must have been magical.
Yeah, it was.
Wow. Just, I mean, the names you rattled off then, I mean, Steve Gadd, you know, Terry Bozzio, two different players, very different players. Were they kind of influences for you? I can hear the Gadd thing more than Bozzio, perhaps.
Yeah, Bosio, the Bosio thing, you know, like super impressed. You know, the things that I've always checked out of him. But it's not a drumming style that it's a drumming style I can appreciate, but it doesn't necessarily move me here.
Yeah.
Where Gad every time just gets me here, and you know, he's probably the top of my tree. He's, you know, he never fails to impress and and move me. That's the most important thing. He moves me, you know, like I can, you know, he impresses me up here, but he also gets me here every time. It's absolutely fantastic.
I had to kind of describe what Gad does once, and it's really difficult to do. I went with a friend of mine to see James Taylor in Manchester in the arena, and he said, sounds great, doesn't it? I said, yeah. And he said, but he said, this fella on drums, he said, you could play everything he's playing. I said, yeah, that's very true. I said, but it wouldn't sound like that. I said, the best way I can describe listening to Steve Gadd is after a cold day, getting into a nice warm bath and just going, oh, that's how it should be. You know, that I said,
yeah,
we can all play what he's playing, but it's the way he plays it. And it's so difficult to get over to people sometimes, especially if they're a non-musician. But Gadd, he's it, isn't he? Let's be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, his groove is just something else, and just don't really know where to start with him. He's just got everything.
No,
you know, like you know, there's drummers that appear more technical than him that just don't move me. He can just move me. He's wonderful,
incredible, phenomenal stuff. Let's talk about the Three Drummers film, because I think this is quite a remarkable thing. There'll be people perhaps watching or listening to this that'll go, what's Three Drummers? But hopefully they'll be able to check it out, because I think you can access it. Can you access it from your website still?
I think there's a link on the website, but it's on YouTube.
Well,
anyone just sort of types in Three Drummers. But the concept behind it was I've got a friend who lives in Norfolk. He's a video maker, director, you know, that kind of thing. And it just struck me one day that myself and Steve Barney and Nathan Curran, we all knew each other as kids. We were all teenagers. We were all aware of each other. Nathan was a year below me at school. I bought my second ever drum kit off Steve, and that's how I knew him. And I used to go anywhere he was playing in Norwich. I used to go and watch him. You know, he's a couple of years older than me, so he was, when we were teenagers, that's obviously a big difference. So, you know, he was like the grown up, and then phenomenal drummer. So we were all in each other's orbits, and we all disappeared. Steve to Liverpool, and myself and Nathan went to London. And we all went on to play with loads of different successful artists. And we worked out, I think it's like we grew up 3 miles apart. So for one drummer to have the good fortune to have played with some of the artists that we played but for 3 of us to grow up within a couple of years of each other, within 3 miles of each other, and then all go on to have careers as drummers, just felt like a story worth telling. And it was just and I think part of it was also that we'd hung out in pairs. So I'd hang out with Steve and Nate, you know, or I'd see Nathan or you know, that, but we'd never, all 3 of us, been in the same room at the same time. So I invited them up here to my studio, and we set up a kit and we did a little bit of playing, but it was more about the interviews and just talking about our memories. You know, we did individual interviews that the other 2 weren't privy to, so no one knew what was said. And then we set up and we sat and we just I think we had a whiskey and sat and had a natter, and my friend Martin filmed it, and then we just put this video together. And the idea was to inspire young people that, like, you can have a dream and it might seem outside the realms of possibility, but work hard and it could happen. You know, it happened to 3 of us because we were passionate about what we did, and we had a lot of support from our families. So we made the film, and then what we decided to do was have a kind of what do they call it? You know, an opening night.
A launch.
A launch, yes. And we hired a venue in Norwich, and the idea was like, well, if we get 30, 40 of our mates down, and it's just an opportunity to catch up with a few people, show the film, have a chat. And we sold this venue out. There was about 300 people, and there was demand for more tickets. So we filled this room, we showed the film, we did a bit of playing, And then we did a Q&A with a local drummer friend of ours, and it was just a blast. We just had a lot of fun. And a lot of people came out of the woodwork that we all played with when we all lived in Norwich that we might not have seen for that time. And they just, so people were coming up and saying hello and, reconnecting with musicians that we may not have seen for a long time. We had our families there. So it was a really, really good night. Really good night. But the film itself,
it's a great film.
Is YouTube, it's just,
And it's one of those films that leaves you feeling warm. You're just like, that's amazing.
Good. That's what we wanted to do. We wanted to pull back the curtain, going, we're just three boys from Norfolk. What are the chances of that? But we made it happen. It wasn't. Yeah, it's not rocket science. It was just a lot of passion and hard work.
I mean, if you saw the combined CVs of everything that you three have ever done, it's like the who's who, isn't it? It's like, wow, quite impressive for a 3-mile radius. I'm pretty
and quite unusual. I mean, there's a connection because Nathan played with Reef about 20 years ago, and then I went to play with them. And then when Roxy Music went out, Nathan went out as the percussionist. So we both played with Reef and we both played with Bryan Ferry. What are the chances of that?
Incredible. And before we go any further, I have to thank Steve for putting us two in touch. So Steve's a good friend of mine. So, and as you with you, of course. So thanks, Steve. Yeah. Appreciate it.
Yeah. So, cheers, Steve.
Oh, he's a good one. So yeah, check that out. As you say, it's on YouTube. Is it just Three Drummers Film? Was it called? How do people search?
Yeah, I mean the title is Three Drummers. So yeah, just type in Three Drummers Film and it should pop up.
Yeah, you won't regret it. It's really, really good, really interesting. And it's drums, so
not to love.
Now, I'm going to ask you about the studio because I'm especially that beautiful Gretsch kit I can just see over your right shoulder. That is it a round badge or is it a broadcaster? I can't quite tell.
Round badge. It's from the it's a bebop kit from the 1960s.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah, and it was a COVID indulgence. It popped up on Reverb, I think, and it was like, oh yeah, I'd love to own that and be part of its journey for a while. So I brought that over from the States.
It's gorgeous.
Years ago, yeah, it's a beautiful thing. Yeah, really.
So is it? Now this is obviously people will be listening on a podcast not knowing what we're talking about. It's kind of like is it an orange sparkle?
Yeah,
goldy.
I think it was advertised as a tangerine sparkle, something like that. Orange, basically, yeah.
And it looks, is it 2012-14 as well?
Or is it 18, 12, 14? And I've got 16 that's sitting here. I've not got that set up for the kit at the moment. Beautiful. But yeah, so 18, 12, 14, 16.
And then I'm guessing that's a Ludwig, just to your...
Yeah, that's a Ludwig. Was it Super... Oh, God, I'm going to forget. Because I've got Super Classic. I've got a big beat over in the vocal booth at the moment, stacked up there. But yeah, that's my go-to kit for. I mean, that just sounds really warm and thuddy, and got a lot of depth and body to it. So yeah, that always works well on a lot of singer-songwriter stuff.
Sure. So I mean, the studio looks beautiful there. So have you got both kits mic'd up at the moment, and are they both kind of ready to go, or have we got the Super Classic mic'd up by the looks of
it? Super. I don't know. I'll spin that around a little bit more. The Super Classic is set up ready to record. I used to have a couple of kits set up ready to record, but now I just use one recording position. Yeah. So the Gretsch kit is just set up for my own practice.
Yeah. Gotcha.
And then I'm going to swing you around as long as that isn't too weird. I've got a couple of my Touring BDC kit is there.
Yes, we'll talk about them in a minute. Oh wow. Slingerland.
That's a rolling Slingerland rolling
bomber.
Which is just a gorgeous kit to play. It does one thing, but it does it beautifully. It's not allowed.
There's not much metal on that, is there?
No, well, that was the idea. They were made in the 40s during the war, so there was a limit on the amount of metal that could be used. I think 10% or something. So basically, it's just the lugs are rosewood, the hoops are maple, I think, and it's just the tension rods, and then a little clamp over the top to attach to the shell, to the rim. Sorry. But yeah, it's a thing of beauty. It was Jay Bellerose that inspired me. I'd seen him play one of those he'd done Ray LaMontagne,
yeah,
and then Robert Plant and Alison Krauss album, and he had one of those, and Yeah, it's one of my, it's my pride and joy, that.
You have calfskin heads on it, or have you gone for
No, I've gone for the fiber skins.
yeah, so similar kind of thing. I mean, do you ever use the calfskin heads?
I've never tried them. No, what are they
Oh,
like?
they're incredible. They're
Are they?
yeah, beautiful. They're a pain in the backside to maintain. If
Yeah.
you know, they'll totally detune or tune up overnight depending on how hot or cold it is. But there's a certain warmth that, and it's like you play into them. They're just beautiful. They really are. And they have a certain sound, definitely. But you know, I think everyone should try them at least at some point.
Yeah. I'm a vegan, so I don't know how that sits really.
Well, yeah, I guess that's a tricky one, isn't it? Yeah. Well, we'll leave that there then for for fear of offending any fellow vegans. But they are. If you get to try any from some old ones, just I
will.
Yeah. I think the fiber skins do a great job of recreating it, don't they? So is it always vintage for you on recordings?
No, not by any stretch, but I feel that's something that I can offer. You know, like I use like I've got, like I say, I've got a couple of BDC kits here which I mainly use for live. But I enjoy using the vintage drums at home because they're every kit has its quirks. And like the great thing about modern kit, like recently made drums, is the precision. And that's great for live because you can set them up, you know what they're going to sound like every night. With the vintage kits, every drum has got its idiosyncrasies, and you tune it slightly different. And I remember that lug needs to be a little bit tight. Nothing quite lines up. And I like that. Again, it's what I appreciate about recording drums is the variability. Because you can do so much on the computer these days, and like it's just getting better and better and more realistic. But what if you want live drums recorded? I think it is about it's sounding good, but getting away from perfection.
Yeah,
you're only going to get that sound from that drum on that day, that kind of thing. And I think that's the uniqueness of that experience, and that that recording, I think is the bit that I enjoy.
I totally 100% get that. And I have a thing about vintage drums where you never know the story of where it's been and what it's done, and I love that. We can all buy vintage drums, and unless you're very lucky and you buy something that has some serious history, in which case you're going to pay a lot of money for it. But I've got some old Ludwig snares and some old pedals and things, and who knows where they've been, where they've played, and I love it. I do.
That's what I love about it as well, because I feel like I'm part of their story. They're not my story, I'm part of their story, because at some point I will sell these on, and hopefully, because what I'm not a fan of with any instrument is putting them in glass cases, kind of thing, unless it's specific to a recording or something like that. But just the idea of musical instruments passing through various people and having a different story, like the Sling and Roland Bomber, was told was owned by a guy in Texas.
Oh wow!
All his life, and he got to 80, shipped it to New York, and that's where I got it from. And now it's in Norfolk, and then who knows where I'll ship it when my time with it is done, and it'll go on and have another story somewhere else. And I love that about vintage instruments as well.
Oh, it's just remarkable. It really is. But I know you were with Premier for a long time. That's no secret. Great drums. And there's your kit is just trying to think. I'm not sure if it's an Elite, but I know it's a Red Moon Sparkle. That's all I can remember. The only kit I've ever seen you with, I think, as far as I'm aware. But there's you're playing Suddenly I See. I don't know. It's a live gig, a big gig somewhere or other, and it's from some years ago. And it looks like there's a giant bass drum next to the right of your kit. Now I don't know. Is that? Have I imagined that? I seem to vaguely remember this. And the bass drum looked blue, but I couldn't quite tell.
That was I bought that. I met a guy at Highgate Station to buy that. That appeared online. That was many moons ago, and it was an old Premier marching drum. that had been converted into a bass drum for a swing band.
Right.
Swing band, and I bought it off this guy because at the time I was kind of getting into I was listening to a lot of Tom Waits, and and with Katie we was kind of doing some demos along those lines, and it was like getting a more open sound. So I did have that drum set up as a second bass drum with a double pedal, but the opposite way around. So not the double pedal, so it kind of the by my hi-hat. So there was two pedals by my bass drum.
A remote pedal.
Yes, and yeah, exactly. So I could play the big bass drum, and what I did, there was one song that had like on the downbeat had more of a boom. So it was just a thing to play with. So live, just set up this big bass drum, and I'd hit that on the one, and then the rest of the bass drum pattern would be on the regular bass drum kind of thing. So yeah, it's just something.
I wanted to make sure I asked about that because I remember seeing it and I remember thinking, what the heck? Because it looked a fair size. It was like a 28 or 30 or something.
Yeah, it was 28. Yeah.
But next to the 22, it looked huge. Yeah. I'm asking what that was. Oh, there we go. That's interesting. So look, let's talk British Drum Company. I love everything about them. What brought you to British Drum Company?
Well, I when I first joined Premier, Keith was there.
Okay.
And I met him briefly on one of their Christmas dues, and I just like the idea of handmade drums. Someone producing drums, and then their paths diverged, and I didn't see him for a while. But when British Drum Company, when I first heard of them, I was like, oh, that's Keith. I remember him. And I always just kept an eye on them, what was going on, and I just got to a stage where I was in touch with Tina Clark from Zildjian, and so she moved over to British Drum Company, and all this time I was just keeping an eye on them. I'd met Al Murray a couple of times, so there was all these kind of connections. And a good friend of mine, Laurie Jenkins, he does Coldplay, and he looks after Ian Matthews, and he does the backing tracks for these guys, and runs the systems, and I think he's also tech for Ian. And so there was all these connections, and I was my friend Laurie was helping me update my studio, and we were talking about British Drum Company. He said, I'll get in touch with Keith, because he talked to Keith. I think Keith made Will from Coldplay a certain drum that was in the middle of the stadium. Anyway, so all these conversations were going on, and Laurie's like, I'll drop Keith a line, you should go up and see the factory, it's great. And I was like, yeah, great, that sounds really cool. So I was in touch with Keith and Tina, and they said, yeah, come and have a look, we'd love to show you around. I was sold. I love, from meeting the guy who glued the plies together to the guy who polished the final drum and put it in a box to be shipped, and you saw every step of the process. And I love drums. I love drumming. I love drums. I love the instrument. They still excite me. And to think that something is not in a xenophobic way, but something with British craftsmen making drums in Britain for British shops and British drummers and beyond. I don't mean this is in any xenophobic way at all, but just the idea of supporting a new company that hopefully has got many years ahead of it, creating these instruments that again are going to be passed around from various people and tell their own stories. There was something quite romantic about it, I think. Is just this warehouse, this factory up in Manchester, creating these beautiful instruments, and the care that was going into it. I was just sold. I thought I'd love to be part of this, and we had a chat, and I've now got a couple of kits that I absolutely love. They sound fantastic. I mean, that was the other thing. I didn't try anything in the factory, but Mel, who was working there at the time, took me to the drum shop nearby, set up a couple of kits, and I was like, oh wow, okay, not only do I love this romantic story of these drums being put together fairly close by, to they actually sound brilliant. So I thought, go with it.
It's dangerous. The minute you set foot through that door, it gets you. It's like, oh, hang on, this is real, this is serious. And the fact that, I'm lucky enough, I've done the tour many times and with other people as well, and I like watching other people's faces now when it's like, wow, when they do the click, when they put the shell in. And, very labor intensive, but the results are just breathtaking, aren't they? You know,
I just really appreciate, like, the drums that I've got here.
Mm.
Someone has paid attention to every single step of the process of them being manufactured,
Yeah.
and I appreciate that.
Mm.
You know, the attention to detail. You know, and I'm gonna keep these drums for the rest of my life. You know, and until at some point maybe I won't retire, but at some point they'll go on and have their own journey. But I just feel attached to them because I know who made them, you know, and I know where they came from, and that I've got a relationship with these people. It's that really appeals to, you know, my sensibilities.
Of course. And the fact that you, as you said, you can put a face and a name to every
Mm,
process, you know who's done, you know,
yeah,
it's incredible. And
yeah.
and when you uh obviously when you do your different gigs with Reef, Rumor, whoever it may be, do you change the sizes of the drums? Do you change heads? Do you do anything different gig to gig?
Yeah, well, my the red sparkle kit is my sort of touring kit with Reef. So that it's in the studio at the moment, but it usually stays in lockup,
Sure.
so I can get just picked up and taken to festivals or whatever. So that is 22, 12, 14, 16, which is kind of, you know, my sizes. They're what I enjoy playing. I got the same kit made 22, 12, 14 in the New Forest finish, which is gorgeous, for that to keep at home and the studio. And I also got an 18-inch bass drum made for gigs, for like the Rumor gig. I had the Rumor gig in mind when I ordered that.
Yeah.
And so I take out with Rumor, I take out that 18, 12, 14, and that works perfectly.
Brilliant.
But I you know, put a hole in the front head of the 18, so I can play with the dampening, and I can have it really tight. And it's the drum itself has got lots of bottom ends, so it's still got quite a bit of weight to it if I want that. Or I can reduce the dampening and it can be a little bit more boomy, sort of thing. So yeah, I sort of play with that a lot.
Oh, it's nice to have that, you know, that flexibility, isn't it, with equipment?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm guessing there's perhaps maybe mallets involved and brushes and what have you with Rumor as well, rather than just
Yeah, all
the
that.
fun of getting those textures out is just that excites me more than playing any amount of fast notes, you know. That's my kind of
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, on that Rumor gig, she wanted to showcase a couple of new tunes, so there was no parts written for it. And in rehearsals, she, you know, because she's worked with him before, she said, "Yeah, I'm thinking more of a sort of Ray LaMontagne, Jay Belrose kind of vibe on that."
Hmm.
And I was like, "Okay," so I picked up a mallet and a one of those brush sticks
Yeah, yeah.
and did something, and they were like, "Yeah, perfect, that's great." And like you said, and it was about texture. It wasn't about a complicated part or anything like that. It was just creating a, you know, like a rhythm, a texture rhythm with lots of texture in it and different sounds, different vibes, sort of thing. So yeah, love doing that.
Fantastic. So obviously we've covered quite a bit of ground there. So what have you got coming up in the future? That anything that's exciting or you're really looking forward to?
What am I particularly looking forward to? Well, dates have started coming in for next year with Reef for the festival season, which is really good fun. They're a great festival band. You know, Jack and Gary and Amy put on a great show. You know, Jack's just vibe central. He seems to, you know, he can walk through a festival site and attract people. Gary's got a great voice, brilliant with the audience. So yeah, they're always fun. We had a really, really good year on the festivals this year, and I'm hoping for the same again next year. There's talk of doing some recording with Rumor soon.
Excellent.
So that's where we ended up at the end of that gig. So I'm hoping that happens. And I think as and when she makes a new record, there'll be some touring. So again, fingers crossed
Yeah.
that I'll get the call from that. And I'll just, you know, just keep plugging away in the studio. Other than that, you know, I'd really like I really appreciate at the moment is the variety of stuff. I'm doing something different every week.
Sure.
What I hope to do again is being something where you go away for a good few weeks and, you know, you get into that touring mindset and, you know, you play it, you know, most nights of the week. And so, yeah, I've just got my fingers crossed something like that will come up again. But,
Amazing.
you know, if I have another year like this year, then I can't complain. It's been great, you know.
And if the Rumor recording happens, are you happy to do that remotely, or would you rather do it in a room with the others? Are you happy to do it from
Um,
your own space? What would you prefer?
I've Rob, her husband, and musical director and producer, knows that I've got this, got the facility here. But I think he was inspired by the gig. He was on that gig, and the new tracks that we played, and he was like, "Yeah, we need to get in a room and recreate that." Because when we played that live, it was magical, and it's like, we need to, I can send you the tracks and you could add drums to it, but what would the ideal scenario, which is what they're trying to put together at the moment, is for us all to get in the same room and try and recreate that magic again. Yeah. So the offer's there if they want anything remote, if it suits it, but I think the plan is to get together.
It's nice to have that flexibility, if whatever you need, it's there. Amazing stuff. Look, Luke, thanks so much. This has been fabulous. Honestly, it's been a real pleasure to talk to you. So thanks for giving up your time so generously.
Yeah, well, thank you for the invitation. I really had a great time.
It's a pleasure, and hopefully we'll get to meet up face to face one of these days. I can shake your hand and say thank you. Top man. Thanks, Luke.
Cheers, mate.
Okay, bye-bye.